Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Ready to explore some seriously cool AI research with me today?
Absolutely. Always up for a deep dive into the world of AI.
Today, we're going way beyond like your typical AI chatbots. You know the ones. We're getting into some cutting-edge stuff. Imagine AI so advanced, it can be modeled after real people, like their thoughts, beliefs, even their quirks.
That's fascinating.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's what we're diving into today with this paper, Generative Agent Simulations of 1,000 People.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did these researchers do?
So they interviewed over 1,000 diverse people for 2 hours each.
Wow, 2 hours. That's a seriously in-depth interview.
Right. They were really trying to get deep into these people's lives and perspectives.
I see. So it's like they're trying to create a digital twin of a real person.
It kind of is. And that leads to some pretty big questions like how accurately can AI actually reflect something as complex as human behavior?
Yeah.
Like do these agents think like us, make decisions like us?
I can see where this is going. It's getting into the nature of consciousness almost.
Well, sort of. And that's exactly what we'll try to uncover as we explore this research. What do you say we jump right in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first, what exactly are these generative agents?
Right. So at their core, they're built using these advanced language models, similar to what powers those chatbots everyone's talking about.
Ah, got it. But I'm guessing these agents are more than just a chatbot.
Oh, yeah, way more. They're designed to capture, like, the subtle nuances of how we humans behave.
And that's where the 2-hour interviews come in, right?
Exactly. I mean, think about it. 2 hours is a long time to talk. That's enough time to, like, tell your whole life story, your hopes, fears, political views, everything.
Yeah, you're basically handing over your entire personality.
And the researchers used all of that to create these incredibly detailed digital representations. It's like each agent has this memory stream that stores all the details from their interview.
So it's like a digital record of their thoughts and experiences.
Precisely. But there's more to it than just storing information. The researchers also added this thing called an expert reflection module.
Okay, what does that do?
Well, imagine a team of like AI psychologists and sociologists analyzing each interview.
Okay, I'm picturing it. So this AI team is basically pulling out like key insights and adding a deeper layer of understanding to each agent.
Exactly. It's not just about mimicking the words on a page. It's about understanding the underlying motivations, beliefs, and personality of the person behind those words.
So how did they actually test to see if these agents, actually work?
Well, they put them through a whole bunch of tests. First up, they use the General Social Survey. That's a survey that asks all sorts of questions about social views, demographics, that kind of stuff.
I've heard of that one. It's used in a lot of social science research.
Yep, exactly. And then, just to make things even more interesting, they also had the agents take the Big Five personality inventory.
You mean like the test that measures traits like extroversion and agreeableness?
That's the one. They even had the agents participate in classic behavioral economics games.
Like the prisoner's dilemma and stuff like that.
Exactly. The ones where you have to decide whether to cooperate or look out for your own interests.
Oh, those are always fun.
But they didn't stop there. To make things even more challenging, they had the agents replicate 5 different social science experiments, actual experiments that were done in the real world. They wanted to see if the agents would behave the same way the human participants did in those studies.
Wow. So they were really putting these agents through the ringer.
They really were. And get this, the results were seriously impressive.
Oh, tell me more.
So they found that the agents were actually able to predict individual responses almost as accurately as the real people could predict their own responses 2 weeks later.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying the AI was better at predicting what a person would do than the person themselves?
It's not that the AI was better, it's that they were almost equally as good. It's kind of like the agents were able to capture a snapshot of each person's mind at the time of the interview, like a model of how they think and make decisions.
So it's not just like memorizing the answers they gave in the interview. It's actually understanding something deeper about how that person makes decisions.
Exactly. It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. So, give me a specific example. How do they actually do on one of those tests?
Okay, so for example, on the General Social Survey, the agents achieved what's called a normalized accuracy of 85%.
Okay, so what does that actually mean?
Well, it basically means that their answers were nearly as consistent as the real people's answers.
So it's like If the AI was a person taking the test, they'd be scoring in the 85th percentile.
Pretty much, yeah. And remember, these agents had never seen these questions before. They were completely relying on what they had learned from those 2-hour interviews.
Wow, that's impressive. Like, what kind of questions were they able to answer correctly?
All sorts, complex questions about social issues, about their beliefs, even hypothetical situations.
Give me an example, like a specific question.
Okay, well, one question asked about, like, government spending on space exploration. And the agents were able to, based on their interview data, pretty accurately predict how their human counterparts would feel about that issue.
So they're not just like spitting back words from the interview. It's more like they actually get how people think and reason about these things.
It seems that way, which honestly, when you think about it, is a pretty amazing accomplishment for AI.
It really is. Like, it's making me rethink what's possible with AI. But before we get too carried away, I have to ask, were there any areas where the agents, didn't do as well? Because, I mean, let's face it, no technology is perfect, really.
Oh, absolutely. You're totally right. There were definitely some limitations to this study. Like, they didn't do as well when it came to predicting certain things in those economic games, for example.
Really? Why do you think that is?
Well, those games, they're designed to kind of tap into those deeper social instincts, like how much we trust strangers or how willing we are to cooperate with others. And it seems like the agents, even though they understood the rules of the game, they weren't always making decisions that aligned with like what we typically see in human behavior.
Interesting. So maybe those 2-hour interviews, even though they were super in-depth, just didn't capture everything needed to predict those more complex social interactions.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Or it could be that, the AI models themselves still need a bit more work to like really grasp those subtle social cues.
I see. So there's definitely still room for improvement.
Oh, definitely. But I think even with these limitations, it's pretty remarkable how close this research has come to replicating human behavior in AI.
It really is. Like, we've come a long way from those early chatbots. But this is raising a ton of other questions for me, like, what does this mean for the future of AI? And more importantly, what are the ethical implications of creating these digital copies of ourselves? I mean, we could talk about this for hours.
Oh, absolutely. It's a big topic with tons of different angles to explore. It really is mind-blowing, isn't it? It makes you wonder, like, where could this all lead?
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine the possibilities if we could actually create AI that can, like, fully predict and understand human behavior.
Yeah, it could change, well, everything.
Okay, so before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go back to those replication studies you mentioned.
Right. Those are really cool.
Remind me again, what were they trying to do with those?
So they basically wanted to see if their AI agents could predict like the outcomes of real world psychology experiments.
So it's like they have 1,000 virtual participants ready to go for any study they can think of.
Exactly. Like a digital research lab.
And if they could actually show that these agents, like, mirror the results of actual experiments, that could open up a whole new world for research.
Oh, absolutely. Like it could change how we do social science research completely.
Wow. Okay, so tell me about, like, one of those experiments. How did they actually test this out?
Okay, so one of the studies they replicated, it was looking at how our perception of someone's intentions influences our moral judgments.
Okay, that's interesting. Give me an example, like, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so imagine like you read a story about a nursing home employee who accidentally like switched a patient's medication.
You mean, like, gave the wrong medication to the wrong patient?
Yeah, exactly. So in one version of the story, it was like a genuine accident, an honest mistake.
Yeah. Okay.
But then in another version of the story, it was framed as being intentional,
Yeah.
like the employee deliberately switched the meds.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that changes things.
Right. And what the researchers wanted to see was how people would react to these different scenarios. Like, would they assign blame differently? Would they suggest different punishments?
So it's about understanding how our perception of someone's intent, whether it was an accident or on purpose, shapes our sense of what's right and wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Like our moral compass.
Okay, that makes sense. So what did they find in the original study?
Well, they found that people were way harsher in their judgments when they thought the medication switch was intentional.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, we tend to be less forgiving if we think someone was deliberately trying to do something bad.
Right, exactly. And the AI agents showed the exact same pattern.
No way. So they weren't just, like, giving random answers. They were actually understanding the human element, the moral reasoning behind it.
Exactly. It's like they get how we humans think.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Did they test out any other psychological phenomena?
They did.
Yeah.
Like another one they looked at was how fairness influences our emotional responses.
Ooh, that's a good one. Everyone wants to be treated fairly.
Right. So picture this, you're playing a game and you have a chance to win like a bonus prize or something.
Okay, I like where this is going. What kind of game?
It's a classic economic game called the dictator game. It's pretty simple. Like one person is the dictator and they get to decide how to split a sum of money with another player.
Oh, I've heard of this one. So, like, they could be super generous and share it equally,
Yeah.
or they could be totally greedy and keep it all for themselves.
Exactly. So it's basically a test of like, are humans naturally altruistic or are we selfish?
I like it. But I'm guessing there's a twist here, right? It's not just about splitting money.
You got it. So in this particular version of the game, there's this extra element added in. Like in one condition, your chances of getting the bonus were determined by like a coin flip, pure chance.
Okay, that seems fair enough.
Right. But then in the other condition, the dictator got to decide your fate.
Oh, I see. So it's about control. Like, whether we feel better about losing if we think the decision was made fairly.
Exactly. Like, do we feel better about a random outcome versus someone deciding that we don't get the bonus?
It's like no one likes to feel like someone is deliberately screwing them over.
Right. It's about fairness. And what they found was that people anticipated feeling way less upset if they didn't get the bonus when it was just left up to chance.
That's totally understandable. It's like,
Yeah.
if it's fate, it's fate. But if some jerk is deciding I don't win, then yeah, I'd be upset.
Exactly. And get this, the AI agents predicted that same emotional response.
Really?
Yeah. Like, they were more likely to predict feeling upset when the dictator had control. Even though, the agents themselves weren't actually playing the game or anything. They had nothing to gain or lose.
Whoa. So it's like they're actually understanding the human experience of these situations, not just like the cold, hard logic of it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's like they get how we feel.
So does this mean like we're on the verge of creating AI that can actually like experience emotions?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's something a lot of researchers are debating right now.
I can imagine. Like, where do we draw the line between simulation and actual sentience?
Right. It's a big question. And, while these agents are really advanced, they're still just computer programs at the end of the day. They're not like sentient beings or anything.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm not quite ready for AI overlords just yet.
But what they can do is simulate those emotions and predict how those emotions might influence, our decisions and behavior.
Still, that's pretty powerful. Like, imagine the implications, both good and bad.
Right. And that actually leads to another important point. We've been talking about the positive stuff, but what about, the potential downsides of all this?
Yeah, the ethical concerns. We definitely need to talk about that.
Absolutely. Like if we can create AI that can predict human emotions so accurately, then couldn't it also be used to like manipulate those emotions?
That's a scary thought. Like, imagine AI being used to trick people or exploit their emotions for, like, profit or political gain.
Yeah, you're hitting on a really important point there, and it's definitely something we need to consider as AI keeps getting more advanced.
It's like with any powerful technology, there's always the potential for it to be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. And it's up to us as a society to decide how we want to use this technology and make sure it's used responsibly.
Couldn't agree more. But before we go too deep into the ethics of all of this, I'm curious, you mentioned earlier that the agents didn't always do so well in those economic games.
Oh, right. I was getting to that.
Can you tell me a bit more about that? Like, what kind of games were they struggling with, and why do you think that was happening?
Yeah, so the games they struggled with, they were games like the trust game and the public goods game.
Okay, and those are...
Well, they're designed to like really test those social instincts,
Yeah.
like our willingness to trust strangers or cooperate for the common good, things like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And what they found was that the agents, like, they understood the rules of the games, but they didn't always make decisions that really aligned with what we typically see in human behavior. Like, their choices were sometimes more random, harder to predict.
So maybe those 2-hour interviews, as in-depth as they were, just didn't capture everything needed to understand how people approach those kinds of situations.
It's possible, like, maybe there's just too much nuance there.
Or maybe the AI needs to get even smarter.
Yeah, maybe the models themselves still need some more tweaking to really grasp those social dynamics.
Right. Still, I mean, it's incredible that we're even at a point where we can create AI that comes this close to replicating human behavior.
I know, right? It really is amazing. But as we've been talking about, it's still early days. Like, who knows what the future holds for this kind of technology?
Right. I think we've definitely given our listeners a lot to think about today.
Like, we've barely scratched the surface.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
So where do you see all of this going? Like, what are the real world applications for this kind of technology?
Oh man, the possibilities are like endless.
Okay, give me some examples.
Well, imagine using these generative agents to like design better interventions,
Yeah?
like in public health or education, even on social media.
Okay, so like how would that work? Give me a specific example.
Okay, so say you're trying to, I don't know, like craft a public health campaign to encourage people to get vaccinated, right?
Right.
You could use these agents to like test out different messages and strategies in a simulated environment, like see which messages are most effective at persuading different types of people.
Oh, I see. So it's like a virtual focus group on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. But like way more nuanced because you're working with these like really sophisticated AI models that are based on real human data.
And that could save a ton of time and money. Right. Like you wouldn't have to run all those expensive real world trials.
Exactly. And it could even help like reduce harm because you're not experimenting on real people with messages that might not work or could even backfire.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
What about for things like social media? How could these agents be used there?
Oh, that's a big one. Like imagine using them to like understand how misinformation spreads online.
Oh, yeah. Like see how different types of people react to fake news and like how those fake news stories actually spread through a network.
Exactly. And then once you understand that, you could start to develop interventions to like slow down the spread of misinformation or even prevent it from taking hold in the first place.
Wow. So like we could actually use AI to fight back against AI generated fake news.
It's definitely a possibility.
That's pretty cool. What about the impact on machine learning in general? Like, do you think this research could help us create, even smarter AI in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I think this has the potential to be like a total game changer for AI development.
Oh.
Well, imagine using this huge bank of generative agents as like a training ground for other AI systems.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
So instead of training AI on like just text or images, you could train it on these really complex models of human behavior.
And that could help create AI that's like way more human-like in how it thinks and interacts with the world.
Yeah, like we could potentially teach AI to be more empathetic, more understanding, maybe even creative by having it learn from these virtual humans.
That's wild. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the positive stuff, but I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the ethical considerations. Like we're talking about creating AI that's basically indistinguishable from a real person. That's got to raise some red flags, right?
Oh, for sure. This is powerful technology, and with any powerful technology, there's the potential for misuse.
Exactly. So like, what are some of the specific ethical concerns that we should be thinking about as this technology develops?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is going to be like ensuring transparency and accountability. Like as these agents become more sophisticated, we need to make sure that we can always tell them apart from real people.
Yeah, because imagine a world where you can't tell if you're talking to a real person or an AI. That could get really messy really fast.
Exactly. We need to avoid those situations where people are like unknowingly interacting with AI and maybe being misled or manipulated.
It's like we need to update the Turing test for the 21st century. Like,
Mhm.
how do we prove that something is human when the AI is so good at pretending?
It's a tough one. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of like preventing these agents from being used for harmful purposes.
Right, like we don't want to see AI being used to spread misinformation, create deepfakes, or like scam people.
Exactly. We need to be really thoughtful about how we design and deploy this technology to make sure it's used for good.
It's a lot of responsibility. But I guess that's true of any powerful technology. It's not just about the tech itself, it's about like the values we build into it and the choices we make about how we use it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Like, it's not just a tech problem, it's a human problem.
Well said. And, this research started with a focus on like U.S. individuals, but what about the rest of the world? Like, is there potential to expand this and create agents that represent, people from different cultures and backgrounds?
Absolutely. That's actually one of the things I'm most excited about. Like, imagine creating a whole library of generative agents that reflects like the full diversity of human experience. People from all over the world, from all walks of life.
It'd be like a digital tapestry of human culture and perspectives.
Exactly. And then Imagine the kinds of things we could learn by studying how these agents interact with each other.
Yeah. Like, could it help us understand different cultures better? Maybe even break down some of those barriers that divide us?
I think so. Like, it could be a really powerful tool for promoting cross-cultural communication and understanding.
It's like instead of just reading about another culture, you could actually like interact with a virtual representation of someone from that culture and get a more like visceral understanding of their worldview.
Yeah. And it could help us challenge our own biases and assumptions, too. Like, we might start to see the world in a whole new way.
It's a powerful vision, and I really hope we see it happen. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today.
We have. It's been quite the deep dive.
It really has. And it's just the beginning. Like, who knows what the future holds for AI? But one thing's for sure, it's going to be an exciting ride.
I can't wait to see what happens next.
Me neither. Thanks for joining me on the deep dive. Until next time.